Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is James Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 12 waiver wire targets for the 2025 fantasy football season. Going into Week 12, we have not only 4 teams on bye, with the Dolphins, Commanders, Chargers, and Broncos, but of course, a plethora of injuries that are going to plague our lineup. So for those of you who are in a must-win scenario and are looking to try to improve your team in order to capture a victory in Week 12 and going beyond, in order to make the fantasy playoffs and get one step closer to achieving our goal of capturing a 2025 fantasy football championship, we'll look to the waiver wire in order to go ahead and bring in some help. Again, besides, of course, the bye weeks, we have players dealing with injuries such as Aaron Rodgers with a fractured non-throwing wrist, Michael Penix out for the season, Dylan Gabriel with a concussion protocol, which of course the starting quarterbacks of those teams being missing certainly does impact the overall success of the players surrounding them. Then we have Josh Jacobs, Drake London, Jalen Warren all dealing with injuries individually, and additionally on top of that, there's going to be probably more injuries that develop and are made notified to us based on the practice reports as we get closer to this upcoming Wednesday through Friday. With that all covered, again, we're going to talk about players at a variety of different positions, the best available running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, kickers, and defenses going into Week 12 who should be prioritized via our waiver wire. Now, for those of you who are familiar with our waiver wire episodes, these are players that are rostered in less than 50% of leagues. If they are available in your league in plus 50%, again, probably not going to be mentioning them as they should already be rostered. Before I get into talking about today's content and of course these specific running backs, beginning with Emanuel Wilson, a quick reminder again for those of you guys who have not yet already subscribed to the channel, as I'm making daily fantasy football content in order to help you capture a championship. And of course, by subscribing today, not only do you get an edge upon your league mates, of course you'll help me get one step closer to achieving my goal of 100,000 subscribers. Of course, at the end of today's episode, I will be putting together a couple plays in regards to tonight's game between the Dallas Cowboys and Las Vegas Raiders. So be sure to go ahead, travel down to the description of the video and check out Betr. For those of you who are trying to make your own plays or of course potentially follow my plays going into tonight. Again, like I mentioned, I will include those at the end of today's episode. But for those of you who sign up today using code Andrew, make that first time deposit minimum of 10 and make a first time play minimum of $1 within a real cash play. You'll get my ranking sent from my email directly to yours every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. And for those of you who sign up today, you'll not only get a first time play, of course free, and also a free $10 via Betr. So take advantage of the opportunity. Check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility based on your current location. Thank you very much for all the support and for using code Andrew. All right, let's go ahead and begin by talking about the running back position in regards to Emanuel Wilson. Like I mentioned moments ago, Josh Jacobs is dealing with a knee injury. And if this is something that is going to hold him out for the next couple of weeks, we know that Josh Jacobs is a tough son of a gun, and he typically wants to play through injuries, but this time may not be the overall opportunity to do so, considering he left in the beginning of the second quarter and did not return for the remainder of the game. And in his absence, Emanuel Wilson was able to get himself a total of 12 touches, 49 total yards, and found himself in the end zone for 13.4 fantasy points. That's a great overall contribution for this offense that is going to be trending into upcoming games in which it should be shootouts. We're talking about the upcoming schedule of Minnesota, Detroit, and Chicago, which again, 3 back-to-back division rival games should be incredibly exciting. But over the course of the last 2 seasons, when we have seen Emanuel Wilson in the spotlight of this offense and given 10 plus touches, there's been 6 instances of that occurring. In those 6 games, he's averaging 12.4 fantasy points per game and a half PPR and has surpassed 10 plus fantasy points in 5 of those 6 games. Therefore, I am anticipating for Emanuel Wilson to be of value as a waiver wire pickup. Again, this is a PSA. Make sure you have your handcuffs on roster as we go forward, as of course injuries are going to continue to plague our teams. But again, another reminder, the Packers backfield is incredibly valuable. Specifically, over the course of the last 22 Green Bay Packers games, the running back position has scored 33 touchdowns for them. Therefore, expect for Emanuel Wilson to be an automatic pickup and play this week. Number 2, we have Chris Rodriguez Jr., who, yes, is going on bye week alongside of the Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins, and Los Angeles Chargers, but Chris Rodriguez Jr. is going to be the starting running back as soon as they return from their hiatus here in Week 12. And the fantasy playoff schedule for the Washington Commanders, in my opinion, is quite advantageous, taking on the Giants. Of course, you have the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 16. Then you have the Dallas Cowboys Week 17 championship weekend. In a game in which Chris Rodriguez is coming off of 15 rushing attempts, that is a career high in terms of total usage from Chris Rodriguez. Therefore, with JCM's fall off being absolutely chronicled over the course of the last 2 weeks, and of course C-Rod taking over this backfield, having scored 1 rushing touchdown in 3 of the last 5 games, I'm assuming of course he needs to be on roster, currently only rostered in 30% of leagues. Going into the bye could be dropped or could be available for you to pick up for the future of the season. Now, another running back that of course is building momentum within his own right is Bhayshul Tuten, currently rostered in 23% of leagues, but in this most recent week prior to sustaining his injury was out of the the gate swinging and absolutely dismantling the Los Angeles Chargers run-stop efforts. Again, Bhayshul Tuten, 15 carries for 74 and a touchdown, had many of opportunities on overall pitches where just get him the ball, get him into open space, and he was finding lanes. And if it wasn't for one of those tackles forcing him to stumble, he could have ripped off a huge run for a touchdown in this most recent game. And now they have an opportunity of taking on the Arizona Cardinals this week. I understand that, again, he is dealing with a bit of an injury himself. He did say to the media afterward that he's going to be good. If in fact this is going to be a two-headed monster going forward, do not be surprised, considering, again, Liam Cohen, as the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last season, was able to display that with both Bucky Irving and, of course, Rachaad White this season. That tandem, what we expected to be earlier on this year between Bhayshul Tuten and ETN, did not take place, but going forward could in fact be the case post-bye week, as they have an Arizona, Tennessee, Indianapolis, New York Jets matchups for the next 4 weeks, which is very much so advantageous for the running back position. Then we move on to Sean Tucker, who luckily this week our hidden gems didn't stay hidden, as Sean Tucker came out and scored 33 fantasy points. So you may be wondering, Andrew, why do you have him as your number 4 coming off of a 3-touchdown game and him outperforming Rachaad White for another consecutive game? Well, the reality of the situation is, as long as Bucky Irving misses this week, yes, Sean Tucker will be a value for this upcoming game against the Los Angeles Rams. Otherwise, the expectation is that Bucky Irving is going to practice entirely this week once again, and in the event in which he gets a good week of practice, he should be anticipated to play. Now, in the event in which Bucky Irving, they want to be safe with him and he misses, Sean Tucker should be on roster. Currently only rostered in 29% of leagues, has scored 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games, is a far more efficient runner than Rachaad White, and is clear in a way taken over the number 1 RB job as it currently stands until Bucky Irving's return. And after Bucky returns, Sean Tucker is the RB2 within this lineup as we go forward within the Tampa Bay Buccaneers season. Again, should be rostered this week. Number 5, we have Bam Knight, another one of these running backs that in the event of the starter not returning due to injury, of course, we have Trey Benson, who was on the injured reserve with the knee scope that he had earlier this year. In the event in which Trey Benson returns, of course, Bam Knight is nullified in terms of his overall value. But in the event in which Trey Benson does not return, considering he did not practice last week, and there's a chance he misses another week of practice, there is a likelihood in which Bam Knight should be not only a starter within fantasy football at a top 36 capacity, but of course, considering Amari DeMercado's overall injuries, and of course, Michael Carter not getting much run, and Bam Knight, of course, having a 60-yard rushing touchdown called back, but prior to that, had himself a rushing touchdown early in the game. I understand that this is an air raid offense, but as long as he continues to get prioritized as a receiving back, of course, he will have certain value this upcoming week in the absence of Trey Benson. The final running back I wanted to mention is Ollie Gordon. Look, the reality of the situation is the Miami Dolphins don't want to utilize Devon Achane on the goal line. And of course, there were many of opportunities in which they could have called better plays and gave Achane the opportunity to score those touchdowns, but it just did not come to fruition. And Ollie Gordon did steal a touchdown, could have had himself another opportunity of scoring another touchdown, but the upcoming schedule post-bye week for the Miami Dolphins looks like New Orleans, the Jets, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Tampa Bay. I truly do believe there are 3 incredibly advantageous matchups there. In matchups, yes, in which Devon Achane is going to find success, but so can Ollie Gordon. Another week to, of course, get past that overall injury that he sustained a couple weeks back with the ankle, hitting the bye week now, post-bye week. Of course, rookies end up having an expanded role. That could be the case with Ollie Gordon starting in week 13 and beyond. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver conversation. Let's continue on with Michael Wilson, who has an unbelievable performance this most recent week, primarily because Jacoby Brissett set the record for the most passing completions in a single game in NFL history with 47 completions. Now, in this most recent game, Michael Wilson, I thought to myself, okay, maybe he gets himself 10 to 12 targets, but 18 was absolutely not what I was anticipating. Over the course of this most recent game, 18 targets, 15 catches, 185 receiving yards. That's the 3rd most targets, 2nd most receptions, and the most receiving yards by a wide receiver this season in a single game in 2025. That was one of the greatest performances we've seen this year. And as long as he continues to get himself this kind of level of opportunity in the absence of Marvin Harrison, who is dealing with, of course, the surgery that he had to remove his appendix, going into week 12, if Marvin Harrison is out taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, we're all in on the Michael Wilson train of the potential of starting him and maybe him even gaining more opportunity going forward, considering this offense is an absolute air raid for the remainder of the year with Jacoby Brissett as their starting quarterback. Again, a lot of potential. Luckily, another one of our hidden gems did not stay hidden. Now, speaking of a hidden gem from this most recent Saturday's video, of course, we had Christian Watson, who absolutely balled out with 2 clutch receiving touchdowns. One with, of course, Willis early in the game, and then later on to seal the deal in double coverage, making a touchdown grab. Again, As long as Christian Watson continues to get more utilization, especially considering, again, this offense without Josh Jacobs and Tucker Kraft, that's their two most primary touchdown options down in the red zone. Now, in their absence, of course, Christian Watson was asked upon to, of course, step up and deliver, and he did exactly that. Going into the future weeks with Josh Jacobs injured, Kraft out for the season, and of course, this offense looking in the direction of someone to elevate them, Christian Watson should be able to do so. Taking on Minnesota this week, I have a lot of hope in his overall potential to succeed. Then we have Xavier Legette. I would like to mention this could be fool's gold like it was earlier this season, but there is a possibility in which Bryce Young does it again. This time last year, Bryce Young was able to absolutely go off for not only fantasy, but for the Carolina Panthers, and showed the world that he could potentially be a name to know in every single household for the remainder of his career. And then he disappeared in the beginning of this year. But now we're back to the late stages of the 2025 season, just like in 2024, in which he goes off. There's a possibility that Xavier Legette, assuming Bryce Young can take him there, can be fantasy relevant, coming off of a game of scoring a touchdown, as they now go into a matchup this upcoming week against the 49ers, who have allowed a lot of points to opposing quarterbacks and wide receivers. Then we move on to another Cardinals wide receiver. Wanted to mention Greg Dortch, who's coming off a great game himself. 6 catches, 66 and a touchdown. Again, like I mentioned before, Jacoby Brissett breaking the single game record for most passing completions in NFL history certainly does elevate the potential of a Greg Dortch, but nonetheless, as long as Marvin Harrison misses any more extended time, Greg Dortch certainly does have value, as this offense is certainly going to go to the air against the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary. Then we have A.D. Mitchell, who going into this most recent week didn't get himself much of an overall opportunity share of snaps on a short week basis, but did see himself a solid target opportunity. Of course, dropped majority of those, but going forward, now that this organization has named Tyrod Taylor the starter, probably for the remainder of the season, I do believe that Tyrod Taylor is far more equipped to allowing these receivers to be far more relevant for fantasy purposes. Of course, with Garrett Wilson on the injured reserve, A.D. Mitchell could certainly be of value. And we also look in the direction of John Metchie. These are two wide receivers that were most recently acquired by this organization via trades, and they want to see what they've got out of these players. These are younger players that certainly could be of value, and we're hoping that both of them can step up going forward. The final wide receiver I wanted to mention is Isaiah Hodgins. In the event in which Darius Slayton misses another consecutive game, we have to take into account in this most recent game, there were only 3 wide receivers on the New York Giants that played offensive snaps: Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Isaiah Hodgins. And if Hodgins is going to claim the priority of the looks, specifically with Jameis Winston under center, if this is a game in which Jackson Dart misses another consecutive week with the concussion protocol, it's a possibility in which Hodgins gets himself enough utilization in a negative game script against the Detroit Lions this upcoming week. All right, let's move on to the tight end conversation. Speaking of the New York Giants, we have Theo Johnson. In the event in which, of course, Jameis is playing, we would prioritize maybe someone like Hodgins. But in the event in which Jackson Dart is back from the concussion protocol, of course, we're all in on Theo Johnson. Like I mentioned in this most recent week, of course, from weeks 4 through 10 with Jackson Dart under center, Theo Johnson's averaging 10.0 fantasy points per game in a half PPR scoring format. And even though he was quite underwhelming with Jameis Winston under center, and I expected a far greater target opportunity share in his direction, nonetheless, again, a lot of the overall opportunities went in the direction of their running backs. Of course, guys like Devin Singletary, and of course, additionally, Tyrone Tracy dominated the game based on the volume of rushes they leaned upon in this most recent week. Now, going forward, we have, of course, Brenton Strange as our number 2. This most recent week did practice, but was not activated for the game, coming off of the injured reserve. He's currently rostered in 20% of leagues, and you have an opportunity of picking up this tight end and playing him against the Cardinals, who are one of the best matchups at the position. Kittle coming off of a game of 2 touchdowns on 67 yards. Dallas 6 for 64, Green Bay 6 for 64 and a touchdown, Indianapolis 7 for 79 and a touchdown. The Arizona Cardinals have been subject to taking on the best tight ends in the league, and if this upcoming week Brenton Strange is highlighted within that upcoming matchup, could certainly be a valuable piece for not only this week, but especially for the fantasy playoffs, considering the advantageous nature of that schedule. Then we have AJ Barner, who's coming off of a career high of both targets and receptions, 11 targets, 10 grabs, 70 yards, was certainly the security blanket in this most recent negative game script contest against the LA Rams, while of course Sam Darnold was under pressure and needed to get the ball out of his hands incredibly quickly. And in doing so, look towards Barner. But this week against the Titans, again, even though the Titans are a solid matchup, 6 catches, 51 from Houston, 6 for 80 from the Los Angeles Chargers, 6 for 44 and a touchdown from New England, 6 for 54 and a touchdown from the Raiders. Even though the Tennessee Titans can be taken advantage of, Barner typically in an omega positive script isn't given much looks outside of hopefully scoring a touchdown. Now, for those of you who are looking for a potential deeper pickup for the future, again, technically Waller is rostered in more leagues than Brenton Strange and AJ Barner. But again, he is an IR stash. Considering he is probably going to return closer to the fantasy playoffs, there is a likelihood in which you could take advantage of his play in the fantasy playoffs, taking on Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Tampa Bay, which are all incredible tight end matchups within their own right. And considering the Dolphins are trending in the right direction, could be something of value for us. Then we move on to the quarterback conversation. I've mentioned it multiple times already this episode, but Jacoby Brissett is coming off of a game of 47 completions on 57 passing attempts, an 82.5% passing completion percentage, 452 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. That is the most completions in NFL history in a single game by a quarterback. That's 5 consecutive weeks of 2 or more passing touchdowns scored. And since week 6, since taking over the job, he's the number 4 overall quarterback in terms of fantasy points per game on average in a 4-point per passing touchdown league. There is no way this team goes back to Kyler Murray. He is only rostered in 22% of sleeper leagues. Jacoby Brissett should be the answer for many of us going forward. Then we have Trevor Lawrence, who's rostered in 35% of leagues, who is, over the course of since week 5 through 11, the number 12 overall quarterback in terms of fantasy points per game on average, having scored 2 or more touchdowns in 4 of the last 6 games. The upcoming schedule looking like the Cardinals, Titans, Colts, Jets is incredibly advantageous for the potential of Trevor Lawrence and for those of you who are in need of a quarterback in the not so distant future. And considering they just absolutely dismantled the Chargers a week before, of course, absolutely throwing a lead to Davis Mills, I don't know what to expect from the Jaguars, but taking on the Arizona Cardinals, I'm expecting an air raid shootout between these two teams. Then we have Bryce Young, speaking of an air raid, coming off of a game of 45 passing attempts, a 70% passing completion nearly, with 448 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and was finally able to get back to what he showed us late last season. Now listen, late last year, from weeks 12 through 18, he may have tricked us all by averaging 20.71 fantasy points per game in the final 7 games of the 2024 season. But this is about the same time in which he can potentially take off. I know that they have an upcoming bye week ahead, but ultimately, if those of you who are in an incredibly desperate position are looking for a quarterback, taking on the 49ers, who have allowed 2+ passing touchdowns from opposing quarterbacks for 6 of the last 7 games, I would like to assume that Bryce Young, coming off of a week that should build confidence within not only him, but for the rest of the offense, should look to be able to find success this week against the 49ers defense. Let's close out today's episode by talking about kickers and defenses. I only wanted to mention 2 kickers. Number 1, Michael Badgley. In the event in which he was dropped this most recent week as the Colts were on bye, currently only rostered in 16% of sleeper leagues, again, pick him up. He scored 9, 12, and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games. Highly valuable taking on the Chiefs this week. Then we have Cairo Santos, rostered in only 35% of leagues, has scored 11+ fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. And this week at home, very much so comfortable within the weather environment, should be asked upon to kick many field goals against that Pittsburgh Steelers defense that has played incredibly well as of late. Then we have the Cleveland Browns as our number 1 defense, rostered in 33% of leagues, coming off of 11+ fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. The Browns on the road versus the Browns at home as a defense is certainly different, but over the course of just talking about the most recent games, we have seen the Browns get 1 interception minimum and 3 sacks minimum and 2 touchdowns as a defense in the last 4 games. There's a possibility in which we end up seeing the Cleveland Browns taking on the Vegas Raiders, who is currently implicated in being the lowest scoring potential total of the week, 37.5, be a game in which both defenses are highlighted. Therefore, I want to mention the Las Vegas Raiders, who again, with the lowest implicated total, and the fact that the Cleveland Browns will most likely have Shedeur Sanders as their starting quarterback this week, all you really have to do is blitz him and get the pass rush after him, get him off his spot, get him uncomfortable, because ultimately, as of late, we have seen fantasy defenses against Dylan Gabriel score 11, 19, and 9 fantasy points. There's a possibility in which we could end up getting even more production against someone like Sanders. Then we have the Chicago Bears. In the event in which, again, Rodgers is to sit because of the wrist fracture, Mason Rudolph would be the starting quarterback. Over the course of the last 3 games, the Bears defense has scored about 6 to 8 fantasy points, but in the event in which we are able to, of course, take advantage of the lesser quarterback taking stage in Chicago, there's a possibility in which Mason Rudolph could throw a couple interceptions, considering, of course, this Chicago Bears defense has gotten an interception in 7 of the last 10 games this season. All right, with that all covered, that's going to cover it in regards to my waiver wire pickups going into this upcoming week. I'll be back later tonight live streaming here on the channel, but I wanted to close out today's episode by putting together a couple plays via BETR, so let's check that out right now. All right, so I have a couple plays that I wanted to share, but let's go ahead and begin with the NFL. This most recent week, it felt like everything was hitting less. Therefore, I want to start out by going less than 17.5 rushing attempts from Javonte Williams. Again, over the course of this season, very rarely has he ever gone more on this number. Again, when we talk about in regulation games, not going to overtime, majority of the time, if I'm talking about like 7 of the last 9 games, he has gone less on this number. Therefore, we're going to lean in the direction of him going less as this offense continues to lean upon the passing game. And of course, this Raiders defense since week 5 allowing less than 3.7 yards per carry on average to opposing running backs. Therefore, they may end up ditching the running capacity. Now, speaking of this game, of course, I wanted to go ahead and talk about someone like Michael Mayer. Considering I do anticipate to see a lot more concerted effort at getting the ball in Brock Bowers' direction, I think Michael Mayer going less than 25.5 receiving yards is something that I'm anticipating to potentially see. So I've gone ahead and technically made a play in regards to these two players. I've already gone ahead and done this earlier today, and this is that play right here. Going less than 25.5 receiving yards and 17.5 rushing attempts. Then we go ahead and let's talk about the NBA. Giannis Antetokounmpo going more than 30.5 points, taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's gotten more on this number in 4 of the last 4 games against the Cavaliers. Then we have Jordan Clarkson going more than 15.5 points. Again, these are all plays that I like, and I've gone ahead and even combined it all 4 for a potential 10x play. Again, for those of you who sign up today using code Andrew, not only will you get a free pick for tonight's game, but you'll also get a free $10 via BETR. But for those of you who want my Sunday morning rankings for the remainder of the season, when you make that first-time deposit minimum of 10 after using code Andrew and make that first-time play within a real cash play, you'll get those rankings sent from my email directly to yours every single Sunday morning. Check your spam folder. That's going to cover for me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Good luck. And, of course, hope you guys were able to find victories in this most recent week. But if not, hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions in order to send you in the right direction later tonight via the live stream. Until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.